and welcome to another educational video about screen printing by Catspit Productions. Today, I wanted to do some more tips on washing out screens. Now, I know I've done probably a couple videos on tips for washing out screens, and we've done some videos on washing out screens, and we've covered this topic before, I'm sure. But we've been getting a lot of questions lately about it for some reason. Very recently on the forum and even on the YouTube channel and the comments and stuff. So today I have a few screens that I have to make, so I figured what we would do is I'd try to give you a couple of tips while I'm actually doing a production run. Over there in the washout booth back yonder. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'll set up the two cameras, one maybe over at the exposure table and one over here at the washout booth. And I'm just going to burn a couple screens and I'm going to try to give you some tips while I'm actually working and see if this works out. Alright, so let's get started. Okay. Okay, so firstly, let me just say that, right now I have a little bit more light in here than I would normally work with. I use a lot of red lights because I actually used to be a photographer once upon a time. So I have a whole bunch of red lights left over, and not only that, I do still have my enlargers and darkroom equipment. So every once in a while on a blue moon, I actually will use the shop area to make some photographs, some old-fashioned silver nitrate, type black and white photographs. So I still use these lights for photography once in a while, not too much anymore. But I do have a yellow light up in the middle of the shop so that it can add a little bit of extra light. Today I'm running a bulb so that you can see me a little bit better and see what's going on. That's why I pulled the screen out and threw it under here and closed it. So my first tip will be that yes, it's true that you can work with certain emulsions in subdued daylight or in, regular fluorescent lights and whatnot, but, eliminate all variables, right? That's my thing. So what I do normally is I would have it just light enough so I can see what I'm doing, okay? And it would be all red or yellow light, okay? And that's what you ideally want to do. Alright, so I'm going to do what I got to do right here for a second. Okay, I got to make this screen. I got these two stencils that are going to be the same color ink. So I'm ganging them up on the same screen. And I'm hoping to anyway. Okay, and this is one of those deals where I might have to push the limits of where I can place it. Hopefully you can hear me good enough. Should always have tools right next to here where you can work, next to your exposure unit, okay? All right, so I think that'll be okay. This is one of those particular jobs that there's a lot of screens for, and they change, and so we try to gang them up. And do the best we can. I'm pushing the limits of where I would really want these stencils to be on this particular screen. I have to admit that. So maybe I should actually move this one up a little bit. Couple one color things that should work. I'm trying to not fog the screen. Okay, so remember that subdued light, really subdued light, or yellow light, red light, yellow light, amber light, those kind of lights will be fine. Right now I have a little added light so you can see. We're going to turn on the back light in a minute, okay, but Oh, this is the other thing. Let me wet this down. But my second tip is use a garden hose with garden hose pressure, household tap pressure, okay, and cold water, whatever that may be for your house. Use the cold side. It might be a little warm or whatever. Sometimes in the summertime here, my water can be warm. And a little spray nozzle, and this is all you should need. If you need more pressure than this to get your stencil out, then you should probably look at your film positive because it might be semi-curing the emulsion. Okay, so that's our first tip on this screen. Garden hose pressure, no more than that. Cold water, okay? And let me work this one out and then I'll give you some more tips. This is something that I'm agitating the emulsion. That's something that you don't really want to do unless you know what you're doing. Okay, I know I can get away with that, it's no problem, but I wouldn't suggest that unless you're a little bit more experienced in screen making. Okay, so here now you can see the stencil a little bit better, right? Okay, so that's it. Okay, so for this screen, my tip now is going to be, I guess, basically at the exposure unit, I'm going to say that your exposure is, it's a good idea to try to make sure the emulsion is cured, okay? I don't want to say that the exposure is like awesome critical, because a lot of the times, we underexpose or, dual cure emulsions have a really wide exposure latitude, so there's a range of exposure times you can get away with them. So I'm going to say not necessarily so much that your exposure time is critical. It is critical in the sense that you want to make sure the emulsion is cured. Okay? The reason that you want to make sure the emulsion is cured is because if it's not cured, it can be a little bit more difficult to work with in the washout booth. It can be a problem. If it's underexposed, it can wash out detailed areas. If it's overexposed, you could semi-cure parts of the stencil you don't want to if your film positives aren't really totally dense. Okay, so basically you have to figure out the exposure time that is just enough to fully cure the emulsion. Okay, and a way that you can tell whether the emulsion is totally cured all the way through the layer is that when you're washing it out in the washout booth, if the inkwell side is really, really slimy, that means it's probably underexposed a little bit. If the substrate side is slimy or tacky, it's definitely underexposed. Okay, just got to concentrate to get those centered. Okay, so here's another one. When you get into the washout booth, you should immediately wet the screen down, especially if you're working under not ideal safe light darkroom conditions. If you're working in an area where you're getting some light, like I am right now, it's a good idea to wet it down immediately. Okay, once you wet the screen down, it's going to kind of like stop the emulsion from reacting, so to speak. The wet, uncured emulsion, right? Now, my tip for this screen is that basically what you want to do is, first of all, wet the screen down and you can let it sit like for a minute, because you want, ideally the emulsion needs to dissolve and rinse out. That's ideal. If you're pushing it out in any sense with the water and it's coming out rubbery or in pieces or anything like that, or it's very difficult to get out, it could be semi-cured. Okay, so basically we want it to rinse out. So we wet it down, we might let it sit a minute, but ideally you should be under 5 minutes or less for washing out a screen. The longer time you spend in here, the more likely you're going to have trouble with your design, with the emulsion getting saturated with water, okay? So that's what you got to do. Really fast, work quickly, rinse. Okay, wet both sides, work it a little bit, give the emulsion time to start to dissolve. Okay, so sometimes you may have to get up close with the garden hose, and that's okay. As long as the emulsion looks like it's rinsing and dissolving and breaking down and not being forced out in any way. So you can get up close with the garden hose and rinse it a little bit, but when you do, remember that increases the pressure and it'll be more likely that you can push off fine lines or little details that you want to keep. All right, here's our last screen. So here's a couple last things. With a multiple bulb exposure unit like this one, this is an industrial black lamp, fluorescent lamp, industrial fluorescent black lamp exposure unit. There's multiple bulbs, there's 8 bulbs or something, right? With that kind of bulb, it's going to be, or with that type of exposure unit, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get detail off, okay? So it'll be a little bit more of a challenge for you to get detail off. If you have really good film positives that are really dense and crisp, that'll help you out a lot, because then you should be able to pull off your exposure just right and get the detail you need. Okay, if you have a point source exposure unit, meaning one of those metal halide bulb units where the bulb is at the bottom of the exposure unit and there's a lot of space between the bulb at the bottom and the glass at the top, that's a point source exposure unit. It has one bulb. Sometimes they have shutters that will well, all right, not like that, but they have shutters and the bulb stays down there heated up while you have it on, like semi-glowing, and you know, that is a point source. And also the little basic exposure units that a lot of you use at home with the work lamp, the 500-watt work lamp or a 1,000-watt work lamp with the glass out, that's also considered a point source exposure unit. With that type of exposing situation, you can get better detail much easier, and it's actually a much better exposure source, really, ideally. If you could buy, I mean, not necessarily a work lamp, but I'm talking about a point source exposure unit that has the bulb at the bottom, one that you buy for screen printing like this one, but a point source, you know, they're really kind of kick butt. You know what I'm saying? They work really good. So that also can affect your screen making abilities. All right, so I just wanted to point that out. And this is the last screen I'm going to do. So I'm just trying to think of anything else that I could say. Again, you know, I can't stress enough about the film positives and making sure that you have good ones. The better your film positives are, the better time you're going to have here, because you're going to be able to get the right exposure, work in subdued light, very subdued light, work in red or yellow light if you can. Okay, you know, try to make the situation ideal, because that's going to help you. Okay, so this is the last screen. Just note that lower mesh counts that hold more amounts of emulsion, and you know, also the more emulsion that you put on the screen, if you create a very thick stencil by layering or whatever way you achieve a thick stencil or a thick coat of emulsion, remember that will be harder to expose and harder to cure fully, and it can, as a result, get saturated with water in the washout booth. So working with thick stencils and such, you're going to want to work really fast and try to make sure your emulsion is very cured. Okay, now the last tip I can give on this last screen. By the way, the mesh prep is also very important. See my other videos for mesh prep. I've done a couple videos. I just did the one previously to this one that explained some mesh prep in detail. And the mesh prep can really help you in the washout area as well. If the emulsion is able to grip onto the mesh well, then you're going to have an easier time washing out your stencil. Okay, and then the thing that I wanted to tell you on this screen basically is as you notice, I flip it around and I rinse both sides and I'm wetting both sides, but I wash it out mainly from the substrate side. The reason for that is because when I coat the emulsion once on the ink, once on the substrate side and then once on the inkwell side, and I put it to dry, most of the emulsion ends up on the substrate side. So if I push it off on this side, the emulsion is against the screen. I don't know if this makes any sense. If you were to spray from the other side, the emulsion is already on the opposite side of the mesh. Do you follow that? Okay, so if you do the coating as I suggest, and the emulsion is mostly on the substrate side, you want to wash out from the substrate side, if that makes sense. Okay, so there's another screen. It's all set. I think that's all I have to say for today. You know, I just figured I would try to give you some tips while I was working, so it kind of would make some sense maybe with what I was doing, or you know, or maybe I would think of something that I haven't thought of already, but I probably haven't. I don't know. So maybe this was good. So anyway, all right, that's it. I gotta finish this up, and that's about it. Remember, if you like what you see and you want to see more videos, thumbs up, rate thumbs up, please subscribe. I appreciate that a lot. If you don't support me in that way, subscribing, commenting, rating thumbs up, then who knows what'll happen to Catspit? Ooh, I don't know. So I need your help. Subscribe, rate thumbs up, comment below, ask questions, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.